Speaking of games, superheroes fly, but Brandon Jones, you've been flying in Microsoft's Flight Simulator.
Nice, good transition. Which is I'm waiting on that Superman mod. We're gonna hopefully get that.
Oh wait, are they working on a
some point.
superhero mod?
I don't know.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, what a great stress reliever that I was just not expecting to really invest in. I thought it might be fun or maybe something that I would check out. It's available on Game Pass. It's just on PC right now. And then, Blood reached out to me and said, I have a friend who's a pilot. And, if you're eager to cover it, this would be a fun conversation to have with him. And so I approached it mostly just to play it for this video that we would do. And what was the F1? What was the recent sim game that you just played, Blood? We were going through, you're talking about seasons and teams, you're doing interviews and all this crazy stuff. Like I do have an attraction just to the depth I love depth in gaming. I love when you just kind of jump off of the deep end and there's so many modes and so much stuff that you can do. A lot of it, potentially optional. And I remember when we were having that conversation, Blood, about F1, I was like, I would be blown away if I was interested in the sport, but there's a lot going on here that I would be really tempted to. Even stuff like golf games, I'm always like, there is a part of me that really wants to dive in, make my own character, do a whole season, play a whole season of MLB. And so it was the first shock I got playing the game was that like everything's unlocked. You can travel to any airport in the world right away. Just go. And I was like, just looking for some kind of weird progression. I still don't know how to log flights, Blood. I land at an airport with the clock going and the game's like, great, you're at an airport. What? And I'm like, I landed. I said I was going to land here. And
apparently you have to turn off like all of your avionics, but I don't know how to do
maybe
that.
Put the brake on or something. But yeah, it's because I'm like I'm trained after playing so many action games and RPGs, stuff like this very level based. That it'll chart all this stuff and it'll be like, you've flown this many miles, now you're this high level, or you unlock some plane, or it's just like, no, you just fly.
Yeah, that's when like the closer you get to like a quote unquote true simulator, the harder it is to sort of gauge the content, because you don't have anything walking you through it. It's just like, here's everything, and like that's why I was kind of lost when the first Project Cars came out, because like, okay, here's a bunch of cars and a bunch of tracks, and then like, when am I done? Like, what do you need me to do? It's like, and like in a way it never quite felt like it was finished in a sense, just because they were just consistently adding to it.
I think that's the thing that terrifies me is I'm really interested in Flight Simulator, but I don't know anything about aviation. And so it's like, well, is this even worth my time? Because like, am I just going to be so lost? Like you mentioned, Brandon, that it was a nice stress reliever, but it's like, do you have to put in an hour of learning to get to that point where you can just enjoy a nice chill flight?
No, I think there's
not exactly. No,
I think there's parking brake helps. It's like there's two buttons on my Xbox controller. Release the parking brake. I can imagine a lot of people skipping the tutorials and just on the runway. Like, what am I missing? And for me, I think one of the biggest things that I will take away from this when GTA 6 comes out, or when I play the next Far Cry, or Just Cause is a great example of something where it's just like lots of planes, I'm doing lots of traveling and stealing helicopters and stuff. It's like you take off in a plane, you just point it up and then you're gone. You take off, whereas like in this, you'll stall. Like if you go to take off in a plane and you just pull that analog stick all the way back, you really have to have a real soft takeoff. And if you have all of the realism settings on, if you like go up too high or you take a turn too fast, it'll be like you died. Like if you tried to do what you just did in that plane, it would stall, the engine would explode, like the plane can't take that. And so it was like, well, I was getting footage actually, Blood. If people have yet to watch our interview with your friend Daniel Gieslin, if you see my footage of Disneyland, of me flying over Disneyland, when that shot cuts, that's the end of that clip. That's literally me like, I'm gonna do one more pass, and I'm like right over like Frontierland, and like whoop, like, and there's no physics of crashes or anything. It just goes to a fail screen. And
Ben, like the first thing that I did is just like the dumbest, like total Google Maps thing is, like I just got in a plane and took off and just started flying around like finding everywhere I've lived in LA, right? Because it's like, you can clearly see, like it's just nuts. Like, yes, that is a photograph of that really old 100-year-old house. Like that's it, and
Yeah.
it's like the right shape, and it's 3D, and there's the parking lot, and just the whole nine yards. And and so, but it was funny though, because like Brandon was saying, I was trying to get a shot of one of my old houses to show my roommate, what it looked like in the game, my old roommate. And I was just like going like, I was just trying to make those passes, and like, nope, I screwed up. Like I ended up on the ground, and was like just trying to get the plane like back and forth. But it's so bizarre once you get the ground level, because it's not made to be seen from that. And so like trees are crossing the street, and like everything's in like weird shapes and stuff. And so it's funny because like from above, it looks perfect.
Yeah.
You get down on the ground, and it's like, what's going on here?
One of my favorites, Ben, is there's street lights, but the street lights aren't attached to poles. It's literally just like little balls of light. And so if you're up looking down, it's fine, but you get low enough, and then all of a sudden there's just this weird plane of just all these little dots, off on the horizon.
Or like a palm tree will just be like a pillar kind of thing. Yeah.
And like the strange like map glitches where they have like stuff is entered incorrectly, and you get these like crazy obelisks like popping up out of the earth. But I love learning geography. I've loved learning geography about my home and my group, born and raised in Southern California. And so when Google Earth came out in VR, it was just fascinating to look around and be like, okay, that's the Hollywood Bowl, that's my high school, Disneyland's over there. It's just neat to know where this stuff is. And in Flight Simulator, you can't just teleport to the Grand Canyon. You got to pick an airport, know where the Grand Canyon is, take off, fly over, and find it. And so it's one of the ones that was tricky was Yosemite. I've been there a couple times.
Right.
And it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. And so I'm like, oh, I'd love to see Yosemite, but like you got to know where it is. And so that's interesting to me to. And there's some crazy airports aren't even airports. They're like, like farms that like have a runway, that like, and so it's interesting when you really get down to details, like finding places where, you can land and how far it actually takes. Like, like you deal with all this nonsense when you get to the airport. You think about air travel. It's like, oh, it takes so long. It's like the flight doesn't. Like the flight's actually really quick. Like you can take off, from where I live, and like I can be in Burbank in 5 minutes. It just takes a long time to land and taxi and then park the plane and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that was funny, because I was like looking around by, where I used to live in Florida as well. And I knew that like somehow there was like a runway around there. I'd never seen where it was. And like, sure enough, it's there in Flight Simulator. It's like, it's got to be private. It's got to be like one guy has a plane, but it's there.
I had a funny moment where I'm going house hunting right now, and we looked at one house, and when we were in the driveway, a plane was landing, and Amanda was like, oh, and she looked at me kind of like, we're thinking the same thing, right? And she's like, that's, something to think about, the noise of the planes. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about checking that airport out, the Flight Simulator later. Like, but I hear you, honey. Yeah, we're on the same wavelength now.
But there is like, how long is it, Brandon? Like 2 hours or so, the like instructional thing with the Cessna?
Oh,
sure.
man.
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like it really, like after like fumbling around on my own, having no idea what I'm doing, I was like, oh, okay. So now I get some basics and how this plane works.
Yeah.
And then of course the next thing I did, like I got into a plane that like didn't have the exact same, controls, and like, where's that thing at? Where's that wheel? Where's the wheel I need to set?
Yeah, and I know a lot of people were upset about the microtransactions. There's just a lot of extra money you can dump on this game.
But I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So there's planes you can buy for, $10, $20, $30. There's like extra packs that add more detail to cities. And a lot of people are upset. As I saw, a lot of people, calling that stuff out, but like, it's the Earth. It's like it's funny when a game gives you the Earth and people are like, and it's like it's big. There's not a lot of games to do that, and you get into the interior of these things, and it's insane. If you like after like the 6th or 7th or 8th plane you try out, and you see like how different these are, and just the difference of sound when you're on the outside of the plane. You can hear the engine humming, and then all of a sudden you're inside and it's really muted, and I don't spend a lot of time. I spend like 90% of the flight time outside the plane just to look at stuff, you know,
Yeah.
because it's like you can just kind of peek over the controls inside planes, but always fun to just check them out. And after a while, it's like, I'm going to try out a plane, not because I think this plane flies better, but because it's like, wow, this is a giant jet. This is like a 747. It's just like, it has a much bigger cockpit. It's fun to like look behind and be like, can I see down into the plane?
Is it
Yeah.
1-to-1 with travel time? So, like, if you do LA to New York, is that how long it would take?
5.5 hours,
Wow.
baby.
Okay.
Which you can, pace out if you want. Like, if you just want to get a sense of how long that distance is, just like fly to Chicago or fly into New Jersey, and then so it's you can kind of leapfrog your way if you want to like make a distance or make a trip. But yeah, I
There are apparently ways to speed up the simulation and stuff too, but you have to do it in a way that like that your plane is level because everything is sped up. You're just basically doing like fast forward. But yeah, well, the thing with that I don't remember if it was Giesland or somebody else in the comments that mentioned this, but like one of the things with the extra transactions and stuff is it sounds like it's not even necessarily like Microsoft selling that stuff. It's like it's open to third parties.
Oh.
And so when somebody's selling you a plane,
That's
it's like that plane manufacturer or whatever selling you that plane. And again, it's like these things aren't just like here's a photograph of what the plane looks like. It's like, no, this is how the plane will react in these conditions to this amount of force.
Gotcha.
And,
And I didn't have any sort of desire whatsoever for more content at all. I mean, it's the Earth, dude. There's so much stuff to go check out, and even just the challenges, which is like just a little slice of an actual like progression or a list of things that you can do.
Yeah.
I remember when I first booted up the game, I jumped in. They were like landing challenges, and I was like, landing challenges? I don't, I'm not going to land in some place I don't know. And then I went back and did them later, and they're a blast. They're really fun. It's fun to, be flying through like a canyon and just like where am, oh, there it is. Okay, let me see if I can, landed on the wrong one way. Okay, let me try it again.
So yeah, and Ben, what I'm doing in it right now is I'm on this like multi-leg, they're like bush flights. So it's through Patagonia. And it's pretty cool the way it lays it out, and the instructional thing definitely helps you understand how this works better too. But basically, you're out, in rural areas in different parts of the world, or like in just straight up jungles at times. And rather than you having like a normal flight plan, you basically have like descriptions. And so it's like, okay, fly on this heading, and you set a timer, and like, okay, once you've gotten about 5 minutes, then look for this river crossing the bridge, and then follow this road, and then look for the river the road by the lake, and then follow that up into the mountains. And so it's like, it's this very interesting way of like, your instructions are just reading the topography and heading in the right direction and timing it out.
Yeah.
So that you know that you're actually looking at the right thing. And it's at times easy to get confused and get lost, if you're not hitting like the timer and stuff, and it's like, okay, but where is like, you want, okay, the river, go with the wider part of the fork in the river, like, okay, which one is that?
Yeah.
That's a real adventure, though.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed in Ghost of Tsushima when they would just have you follow a picture and you'd have to scan the environment to try to figure out where to go. Or in Red Dead Redemption, the treasure hunts. And this seems much more complicated than that, but sort of in the same vein, in a really fun way. As far as like out of the box stuff, how many planes do you get access to, and do you have to kind of earn your way to get different planes, or can you just switch to whatever you want at any point?
Yeah, it's all in there. I think you get a couple dozen, like 20 something.
Yeah, I haven't done a count, but yeah, there's very small, like completely open cockpit, like prop planes all the way up to like, yeah, Brandon was saying, like just huge jumbo airliners.
Oh, dude, and Ben, landing those huge like airliners, man, is tough.
Yeah.
Like, you think you're fine, like you're just coming in, you're like, I play Pilot Wings, I got this,
Yeah.
It's like, no.
Well, even with the little bush plane, I had to redo. So these segments are like, so I think the full trip is going to be like 7 hours. And then the segments range anywhere from like 15 to 20 minutes to like an hour and a half, just depending on the leg of the trip, because you're basically hopping from airport to airport. And I did this one that was like 25, 30 minutes. And I get to the end and like I've landed the planes plenty of times before, but I just misjudged how fast I was going. And so I got onto the runway and I, hit the brakes and I'm like, oh, I'm going a little bit too fast. So I hit the brakes a little harder and then just flip my plane over.
Oh.
And then they don't give you a rewind like Forza.
Nope.
It's like, start that over again.
Yep.
Now I kind of want a Brandon and Blood Best Wipes Microsoft Flight Simulator compilation. There are different versions of this game, correct? And one of those versions is on Game Pass. Is that accurate?
I don't know anything about different versions other than like the deluxe edition maybe that has like more planes.
Okay,
But
I could be wrong. I just thought I
don't know.
remember hearing that. But is it on Game Pass?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think the other reason why I haven't satiated my curiosity and downloaded it is just because it's very, very large as well. Take up a lot
It
of
is
space.
insane. Yeah.
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 Deceptively so. You get it and then boot it up and it's like, okay, now to download way more than we just downloaded.
Yeah, like you'd obviously, most of the time, like when you download a big game like this, you'd want to put it on SSD. And like, I haven't upgraded an SSD big enough to hold this stupid game.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, I've got my giant production drive where I put all my footage. So I just put it on there. So it is one where it's like, I just kind of put up with my PC struggling through it because I know that the PCs this is built for aren't coming out until 2024 anyways.
Yeah. When you just learning, because you mentioned like kind of this 2-hour instructional session that you can do, but when you're flying, can you tailor, like, are there tips that come up as while you're mid-flight, or is it kind of just you're completely on your own, or does that stuff, can you tweak that individually, or?
There's basically like a difficulty setting thing, and then there's like a way deeper options that you can customize. Just kind of think of it sort of like when you do your graphic settings, it's like,
Sure.
It's like you got low, medium, and high, and then with this, it's like, okay, you got really realistic or really handholdy, but then you can go in and like customize, what tooltips you want to show and all of that.
When you're talking about difficulty, so let's say you put it on the easiest setting, does that just mean you get more help, or the actual flying is easier?
Both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there are things that kind of guide you a little bit in there that keep you from totally. I mean, if you hold like Bram was saying, if you hold the analog stick up or down, then like you're gonna crash.
Yeah.
But it kind of keeps you from just like getting overwhelmed.
It's funny, Ben, a lot of times when I've gone inside the cockpit, I'll be outside and I'm just like, oh, it's so beautiful. I see the sunset and the city below. And it's like, let me see what's inside the cockpit. And I'll go in and it's like, boop, 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 boop. I'm like,
Hey,
whoa, what's going on?
pay attention.
Like, no, it's like, you're out of gas. You're going too fast. Your angle's wrong. Like, your attitude's wrong. Like, oh.
I think you meant altitude, but you said
No, attitude is different.
Yep, there's attitude and altitude.
Isn't attitude?
My attitude's fine. Thank you very much.
Wait. Attitude is a flying term?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's basically.
I didn't know.
Like where your plane is pointing.
Okay.
Like up and down and left and right.
So now what I want, I think you guys you sound like flight experts.
Yeah.
Like you've been around the world. So now I just want to do Brandon and Blood's flight school. Get my wings.
Well, I've landed in Los Angeles so many times, and I'm so used to like this pass that they do, like when they come in over the ocean and then they do this big U-turn to land. It always seems like the plane is turning like forever, like it'll tilt, and it's just like, have we seriously not turned yet? And like, no, like if you want to turn fast, like if you are in like an action game and you just like whoop, like spin a plane around, everyone in that plane just passed out. Like there's no way like you could, or literally you went sideways, and it's like you can imagine everybody like like on a like a Delta flight, like just laying on one side. So it's interesting. Yeah, those big planes have been kind of the most eye-opening thing for me. Just
Sure.
like, this is real hard. You got to be very patient.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't even touched any of those big planes yet. It's been in little dinky things.
Man, it sounds fun, and it also just sounds like it could eat so much time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Easily.
I haven't actually landed I landed in the challenges, and like there's a couple short flights that I intentionally did, but most of the time I'll just be like, depart, arrival wherever, and then I'll just fly in and go around Chicago or New York or
Sure.
LA and stuff and look at the sights.